Perhaps some change and move in the SEC as we get closer to the addition of Texas and Oklahoma. This was talked about Friday by SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, who's been around the block for a while. He was on his network that he owns in part with Disney on the SEC network with Paul Feinbaum on Friday. This is what he had to say to Paul about the possibility of the SEC going to single division. He said options include this single division structure. It doesn't mean we go to that, but perhaps there are no divisions. If we do that, that needs to be carefully considered. We've seen a bit of rush of commentary. Hey, let's just go ahead and change our expectations of how a conference championship game is conducted. That's really the rule in play. What do you have to do to have a conference championship game? Someone said, let's just go change that quickly. Well, it's interesting that those who want to change that aspect quickly, that ties directly into the postseason, don't want to look at the postseason and try to address those situations in a timely fashion. He goes on to say, I'll take both sides and say, good, let's have a single game format dialogue. Let's not try to cram into 30 days if people are unwilling to in trying to move along earlier in the CFP, college football playoff format. Let's talk about the implications for the regular season, the postseason, and the postseason qualification before we take a quick vote. I want to make sure that y'all are taking a quick vote. Make sure you're getting DAWGSTRUCTION. It's right down below. I appreciate everybody ordering it. We've had a lot of orders. I've shown you the book here lately. I want to try to show it. There it is. And just flip through it real quick. When you start talking about Greg Sankey and what he's saying, Greg is as measured as it gets in terms of what he says. And eliminating divisions from the SEC would have massive ramifications. I mean, here we are in the book, Georgia playing two Western teams back to back, Arkansas and then Auburn. The Arkansas game would probably go away for a while. Would the Missouri game go away for forever? I don't know. And I think that the part what we can't know here is if the part we can't really know on all of this, and what we can't guarantee, and this is the trickiest part, is that the best two teams will come from separate divisions. Right now and lately, that's been the case. Ever since Georgia's populated to the top, and even the 1 year that Dan Mullen won the division, the best two teams from the league were from opposite divisions. That's not always going to be the case. And the beauty of the SEC over its division time over the last 30 years is that the league has had relative balance with who the best teams were. The East was better in the 90s, and in the 2010s, the teens, the West has been better. But you always had Alabama and Florida in the 90s. Then you had in the 2000s, it was a mixture of a lot of stuff. I mean, you had Florida and Georgia winning the conference 4 times in that decade. Had Alabama only come to power late at the end. LSU winning the national championship. So it was a hodgepodge in the 2000s. But in the teens, it definitely shifted west. And that was mainly because of Alabama. And now, over the last however many years, we've seen, that Georgia has risen to the top of the conference. And that's helped balance things out. I am concerned. Well, if you're a member of Dog Post, I think you know my dissatisfaction with Georgia playing at Missouri. They can play Missouri in Athens twice a year. I don't care about that. My dissatisfaction with Missouri coming in the league has been traveling to Missouri. And I completely understand that there's no scenario where Mizzou would come to Georgia and Georgia wouldn't go to Missouri. So I think you get into these games that are kind of pointless. I mean, Georgia, Missouri, South Carolina, Texas A&M. Do we need those games? I mean, like, wouldn't Georgia Alabama be a more favorable matchup, more traditional, more fun? What's going to happen when Texas and Oklahoma come in? I mean, is Georgia going to swap Missouri out for Oklahoma? So there's got to be an equitable thing here. And right now, you really couldn't put Texas and OU in the West and call it equitable with the East. I don't think, and leave the two the way they are. Um, you'd have to push Auburn over or possibly Alabama over to the East, and then do you have the SEC anymore? And I think that's really what you want to worry about if you're Greg Sankey. Traditions have flown out; they're gone, and you want to keep what you've got now. If you lived in an SEC world where Georgia, Florida was on campus, and Georgia and Auburn didn't play one another, and Tennessee and Alabama didn't play one another, and you didn't have Florida, Tennessee, excuse me, Florida, the Gators and LSU playing, are you really in the SEC anymore? I mean, are you really Georgia if you don't play in Jacksonville? Are you really Georgia if you don't play Auburn? Are you really Georgia if you don't play Georgia Tech? You can't give away what you are for something new. And there are certain things that I would carve out of the future of the SEC. I would carve out I'd carve out Missouri to begin with, and I would find a better fit for the league. NC State, somebody, but Missouri's in. I ain't never going to change. I'll stop my campaign right now. Um, if you're going to get Texas, Alabama, um, you can't make it so hard for the winner of the league to survive the league. And there's so much we don't know about what the future is, and it almost all ties back to broadcasting. And what will Disney want out of the new SEC? Will it want a 10-game schedule where each team plays a 6-game pod? I mean, I don't know. We have a 16 team league here, and Georgia's situation in that league is not as precarious as South Carolina's, but um, I could talk about this for a while. You know, again, I think you have to protect what you've got. And the league has done a pretty good job of that. They have said, we're keeping Auburn, Georgia, we're keeping Alabama, Tennessee, we're keeping Mississippi, Vanderbilt, we're keeping LSU, Florida. These games are protected games. You can't go away from Georgia, Auburn. Georgia sacrificed in 13 to make sure that wasn't the case. But once you get away from uh, Georgia Auburn to have Georgia Missouri, that's a problem. Once you get away from Georgia Alabama playing once or twice every 5 years to them playing once every 10 or 12 in the regular season, that's a problem. Georgia LSU have not played back to back home games since 2008 and 9. So that's come, and they're not scheduled to play one another again in a regular season game until 24 or 5. Um, Bringing Carolina and Arkansas into the league made a fundamental shift, but it brought sanity to an SEC where you only had to play 6 games in a season. It gave us the championship game. It gave us divisions. It gave us, um, you know, 12 was an even number. There were a lot of things you could do with 12. It gave you an 8-game schedule. It gave you the rise to the power that is the SEC now. Did Missouri and Texas A&M add anything? Didn't seem like it to me. I mean, no offense to Texas A&M. I'm not here to crush their dreams. Are Texas and Oklahoma, is the addition of Texas Oklahoma a bigger deal than Texas than A&M Missouri? No question. But what is the ramifications of that? Where are we headed here? Are we headed to essentially 4 pods where you play 3 in your pod every single year, and then you play a crossover pod and then you play 4 other non-pod games. Well, if they're equitable, then that makes sense. If the pod for Georgia is Georgia, Florida, um, I mean, the problem is you can't do it right. I mean, like it's too confusing to get everybody in. You if you have a pod with Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and Kentucky, that's a pretty weak pod, generally speaking, historically. There's going to be times where Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, and someone else would be a historically weak pod, but uh, not a lot of times. Not a lot of times. So I don't know how they equitably do this if you're going to pods. Because once you start about a one division thing, inevitably pods exist, whether you say it or not. And this is something that the league, I'm sure, is discussing. And how they really pull this off, I don't know. I'll tell you this, though. If I got to see another damn trip to Missouri without playing Alabama or LSU or somebody that matters along the way, I just take my money and throw it into the toilet when I go out there. I don't have a problem when I get out there. I don't. It's a nice place. It's just in Middle Earth, and there's just no value to it for me. It's like Texas A&M going to Nashville or going to Kentucky. It's just nothing there. It's too far. It doesn't make sense. It's it's what it is, and that's what you get paid the $56 million a year, soon to be almost $80 million a year if you're in the league. But you got to hang on to what you got. And the question is, what will these pods be? Is this going to be a one division situation? And then how do you determine you go into a Big 12 thing where there's too much confusion, and I think the SEC is not going to do anything until we see the college football playoff go to an expansion. Once that expands, there's a lot of different things you can do then. But if this is a 4-team playoff, why would Georgia want to play Alabama, LSU, Florida, Tennessee, and Auburn every single season? They wouldn't, they won't, that's not going to happen. So this is the waiting game we got going on here. And the person that's most, well, there's two really critical folks here. That's Fox News Corporation and Disney, which is ESPN. Once they let go of their leashes and allow the Big Ten and the Pac 12 and the Big 12 to do particular things, and the leagues allow themselves to do that, which is not always an easy thing to do with that group, you'll see the future emerge. Disney totally controls the future of the SEC and the ACC, or at least the next 10 years of the SEC and the next forever of the ACC, if it even exists in the future. So those leagues you can make change. The Big Ten, which is the real problem here, and I don't mean problem in a negative way, they got to figure out what they're doing, and they got multiple broadcast partners. That's tricky. This is all about TV. Yeah, that's just all there is to it. They're not going to go into divisions or one division or change this until we see that. And the clock is ticking here on Greg Sankey. I mean, I don't admire his situation. I admire what he's done to set the league up to dominate college football, to dominate college sports in the future. Let me ask you this, and I'll think about this. Who's bigger? Who matters more? The Arizona Diamondbacks or the Georgia Bulldogs? Who matters more? The New York Rangers? I'm really going out there. The New York Rangers or the Georgia Bulldogs? Is Alabama more valuable an asset than the Oakland A's? I would say unquestionably. That's how powerful the colleges have become. They're bigger than Major League Hockey, Major League Baseball. They're never going to be bigger than the NFL, but they're bigger than almost everything else. NASCAR and hockey cannot compete with this league. If they could, they'd be getting better ratings. They don't. And it's more to talk about later. Divisions, we'll see. Hey, pick the book up down below. Thanks for listening and watching. We'll see you over on the website.